All right, welcome back to Lead Scoring Monday. I'm Casey Hawkins here with Chris Carolyn and Riley Powell. Quick context check before we dive in, because Riley just raised a really important point in our pre-show chat. If you've been following this series, you know we've been building a specific point of view. 2 weeks ago, we asked who are we scoring, and we landed on everyone. Not just leads, customers, prospects, researchers, hand raisers, unified relationship health across the entire journey. Last week, we asked, why are we scoring? And we said resource allocation, not just to hit 100 points, notify sales, but strategic decisions about what to do next based on where someone actually is. So when we're talking about customers, we might use our score to say whether or not customer success might need to reach out, whether that's positive or negative. And then maybe our prospects, maybe it's just a LinkedIn message. It's not necessarily a phone call every time. So today, when we talk about what we're scoring, we need to be really clear. We're not talking about traditional lead scoring where the only who is leads and the only why is send to sales when they hit a threshold. We're talking about value first scoring, where who is everyone in your database and why is contextual. Different resources deployed based on their actual stages and readiness. That changes everything about what we score. Because if you're still in the old world where you're just trying to identify MQLs to hand them to sales, then yeah, you're scoring form fills, demo requests, pricing page views. You're chasing that one trigger point. But if you're in the value first world we've been building here, you're scoring completely different things. You're scoring fit signals to tell you if there's potential for a relationship at all, engagement signals that tell you what stage someone's in, are they audience, researcher, hand raiser, progression signals, and this is a big one today, that's going to tell you someone's actually moving forward, not just being active. So before we go any further, the conversation is grounded in who and why we've already established in this series. And if you're still in traditional lead scoring mode, where it's just about identifying MQLs and SQLs, some of what we talked today might not make a whole lot of sense yet, and that's okay, but we need to set that stage up front. Chris, did I do it?
You did it. I think it's fair. Maybe one point of clarification,
Yep.
and apologies if we didn't go into this related to the why. Like we are very focused on the triggers, I think, like triggering resources.
Mhm.
But the other side of that why is understanding like how those resources are performing. So like all of our reporting and our visibility into the health of the business based on the health of the relationships internally and externally is also a key part, because definitely I've seen some situations where it's just like let's trigger the outreach and then we're not tracking the
Right.
success of the outreach,
Mhm.
right? So it's easy to get that part missed. So I'd add
Mhm.
that part onto the why.
Riley, are you feeling like we've established where we are?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's the bridging the gap of the people doing it the old way to like talking about it in this new way that we're trying to kind of launch and set forth as like the standard is going to be, the tricky bit of when we get there. But for right now, like I think this is the direction that things should be built in if you're going to be building going forward. So
Mhm. All right. So if everyone's happy, then then we're good. I think the areas when we talk about what we're actually scoring, to me, and if this is your first time watching, sometimes my opinion changes throughout this. But to me, they fall into 3 categories. First is still our fit signals, so the things that a company or person the things about a company or person that tells you if there's potential for value creation there. Um, then the engagement signals, which is not necessarily volume, but depth in what stages they're in, what are they naturally doing at these stages. And then third, and this is the I think what we'll spend most of our time on probably today is the progression signals. And that is, how do you know if someone's moving forward from audience to researcher, researcher to hand raiser, and so on? Because activity doesn't necessarily equal progression. And we just want to recognize when those engagements are changing.
Agreed.
Because I think we'll spend most of our time on the progression signals, I want to kind of
Set the
run
stage.
through fit and engagement for anyone that isn't familiar with those, which Chris is going to be chomping at the bits to get to.
Well, first, and just because I was just having a great conversation with Max, Liz, George, and Chad on the Hub Heroes podcast.
Name drop.
And when I said the word signals, Max asked me for a definition, like
Oh.
during the conversation, like what did I mean by signals? So I think it's important to set that foundation. And I feel so strongly about this. I've added a glossary to the website. And like, if we don't agree on this level of the language, right, then we're not going to have like productive conversations. And I think both of these two, signals and signal strength, are paramount to the conversation. So signals, natural indicators of interest or need from human interactions, right? This is why it expands across the whole life cycle, across every channel. And what we're going to get into today, like this, like your customer base, the people that you care about measuring the signal from, like email still might be their jam. And you still might be measuring a lot of the things that you used to measure. It's just the positioning, the framing of how we measure them, right? And then alongside that is signal strength. So intensity and authenticity of the interest indicators. Are these fair definitions, Riley?
Yeah, can I poke around and just indicate for signals, this seems to be activity based. So like a differentiator being, and I'm not sure if everybody talks about, fit scoring or things like this, where like, if a company is in a certain industry, that's a good signal. I think this wouldn't be that definition of signal. Meaning like these firmographic, demographic components about a company or a contact isn't a signal. It's a criteria in like a fit, which I just want to differentiate if we're going to call them. I just don't want to call those signals if this is signal.
Right. So we should call them signals, in my opinion. There's more static signals versus dynamic signals, right? So interest or need, we still have the power and should exercise that power in the organization to focus on who we believe to be in our target addressable market. And that is based on signals of how the organization and the humans define themselves, right? So if they're in XYZ industry, that is a demographic signal that says, okay, we care about them.
Got it.
So literally,
so
there's
there are
internal
signals,
and
signals,
external
and progression signals that all use this definition for the term signal.
Right. So when we hear HubSpot continue to say signal-based scoring, any kind of score that we build, right, should, like, in my opinion, we need to defend like the signals that we're describing as a part of that score.
So when we talk about fit signals, if we're talking about what we're scoring in a fit signal, we're scoring their likelihood to have an interest or need in our offering based on.
I would indicate for this, like your scroll up if you a little bit in the definition, natural indicators of interest or need from human interactions. I would say who you are is not an interaction. So like if I'm going to improve this definition a little bit, be like human interactions or descriptions, replacing the term lead, just because what industry you're in or what state
Mhm.
you operate in isn't an interaction so much as it is like when I see the word interaction, I think of like an engagement, something that an action that has occurred.
Okay, that's fair. How would you define the action of somebody in the organization deciding that this is an industry that we're going to target?
Research?
Right. Like, so I think I think the meat of the interpretation is that this can be internal,
Oh, okay, yeah,
right?
I viewed it mostly as external.
I did
Right.
too. Reading it, I read that.
Yeah. And I'm sure we can improve some language here, but it's basically every human involved in this process is constantly emitting signals, right? And they're having to, it's from some action, even if it's just like a random thought, right? Thrown out
Mhm.
in a meeting. Or we paid for it because we think Boston Consulting Group knows more than our own internal experts somehow. All of that is like a signal of some sort that should define like our strategic use of resources. I'm probably going to get rid of this part because this is not applicable. It's super confusing in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I would add something behind the comma about differentiating between internal and external, or at
Mhm.
least acknowledging that it's both.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Interest or need. See, so I would argue then if it's internal, then it might reject the natural like phrase, natural indicator, like that seems artificial of like, oh, we're artificially targeting this industry. And so the signal of, hey, we should target SaaS is like it's an artificial more than like a natural. But again, I don't want to spend an hour on definitional, clarity, which I could.
Right.
So just to bring this back to where we need to be, go ahead.
Yeah. But I
So,
do think that, like this lens, if you can apply it to all over what we're going to talk about, even this here, which is just a different way to say like fit, engagement, and progression here. Like, and
mhm.
we didn't plan this ahead of time, right? Website visits and content consumption can be somebody like looking at websites internally and saying, oh, our competitors are saying it like this, or our customers are saying it like this on their own website when they describe their own industry, and we've been saying it like this. Now that should adjust our fit score, right? Are they a fit or not, right? And through this whole way, like all these things can be done internally or externally, right? So if we can just try to have that lens on as we move through, and I think it opens the door for true like understanding of signal recognition all over the place.
Mhm. So when we talk about the fit signals that when we talk about like what is that? I mean, we've talked about industry already. I think that's a big one. One that was weirdly kept coming up in my head was like language. Um, I I do HubSpot consulting, HubSpot coaching. If you don't speak English, I don't have the resources right now to help you. I mean, that's like a very easy way of saying. Like I think sometimes people miss some of the like even the most basic pieces. Um But then the other thing I think people get wrong with fit signals is, what I tend to refer to as, like, aspirational fit versus, like, their actual fit. When I was doing the mastermind course ahead of the scoring sunset, I talked a lot about a client that I have who for at least a year, if not more, discussed their ideal customer profile was like CEOs at hospitals. And we were having a really hard time getting in front of CEOs at hospitals because a lot of people are trying to get in front of CEOs of hospitals. But then they ended up talking to their sales team and they found out that almost all of their buyers are like manager level. And then their biggest contracts are people who started at manager level but have moved up over the years. But they already had this relationship. So then they they moved up, they got bigger budgets, and they kind of moved us up with them. But starting at the top was not happening. Like that just wasn't that was aspirational, sure. So I think there's a big piece of this in like you have data. I know, Chris, you're really big on like just using the data we already have. Who are your buyers? And you can ask Breeze now. Like you can go into Breeze and you can say, what are the job titles associated with deals? What are the most common industries associated with deals? And just using that.
Yeah.
Riley, when you were rebuilding scores ahead of the sunset, you were leveraging Breeze some, I think, like this, weren't you? Or am I
Yeah,
getting?
I was just trying to, because Breeze was just coming out and was like really, really getting competent, in my opinion. And so I was just doing a lot of analysis using it instead of pulling data from HubSpot or the old way of doing it, which is like manually just looking through stuff and creating your own correlations and associations, like just asking Breeze, like, hey, analyze my existing customer base with, deals and look for trends in property values, look for trends in, city, state, look for trends in industry, look for trends in whatever these kind of fit criteria would be. To me, fit is like firmographic and demographic information. Like it's a pretty finite pool of things. They're things that don't really change over time much, but they do change over time some, and that actually was something that I realized when doing some of this was, to your point, actually, Casey is an even better example where like what is almost needed is like what was the property values of that contact when that first deal closed one.
Mm-hmm.
If their job title has changed and et cetera, XYZ has changed, like I don't want to key off of scoring it because they're now the CEO. What I wanted to key off of was 3 years ago when they were the manager.
Mm-hmm.
That's the one that has the weight. So like
Mm-hmm.
data value changing over time too is really important when you're trying to figure out the fit score of like, okay, if you're trying to assess deal creation or like deal goes to closed one, and that's like your North Star of like, these are good fits, then ideally setting up some structure where either HubSpot can, I'm not sure what level of information it has to like property history, but like,
Yeah, I don't know. My face is scrunching up because I'm like, I don't know. Like,
yeah, I don't either. But it was a gap because I was talking to a client about it as well, and they were like, well, they actually were something else, or worst case, they were at a different company. But
that's what I'm thinking.
if you don't go change the association between the contact and the company, like
Mm-hmm.
it has all of these kind of historical tendencies. So you can fall into a bit of a trap there with the data if you're not maintaining it correctly. But maintaining data correctly is its own beast.
But yeah, I mean, I think yes. Moral of the story is fit is the things about a person, a company,
Mm-hmm.
and you can and should be using the data in your CRM to identify those.
Yeah.
I often go
I
ahead.
think like that's where the signals in general should not be seen as good or bad. Like the decision to say that the signal we are responding to is we think CEOs in this space are what is going to get it for us. And then we come back and say, oh, that's not it. Right. It took that first moment of documentation to decide like this is what most companies aren't even doing that. Right. So
Mhm.
everything is kind of turns into hearsay around, the conference table about who, what, when, how, when we just need to like, plant the flag at some point. That planting of the flag is always based on some kind of signal, internal or external.
Mhm.
And have we documented that? And are we measuring like success or failure against it?
Yeah. And actually, Chris, something interesting would be to go back to your model, the signal and signal strength. There might be another like value called like signal relevancy that is like assessed after the fact, because the strength is agnostic of if it was a good or bad signal in the first place. It's still a strong indicator, but then it's okay, well, how relevant is this to like what we're trying to accomplish?
Yeah.
Yep.
So I just wanted to pull this up because like this is kind of the old way I used to do this. I would create a table report inside of HubSpot. I would filter it to all of our deals that are closed won. And then I'd start pulling contact and company values in here and seeing like where we start to see things in common. I then evolved this one step to say I would then send this table to an AI tool because and see what similarities there are, because you can see in this case we don't have a lot of overlapping job titles, but if you just look, you can see there's some overlap. CRM specialist, CRM lead architect, CRM architect. Those are things that are hard to like normalize by just looking here. But if I literally would just export this, send it to AI, and AI would be like, here are like the things you should be including. But now you can even go one step further, and you can just ask Breeze, can you look at all the closed won deals in this account? Know what the common job titles are of contacts associated with deals. Let's see if it works.
And on that report, like as it stands, we don't have a lot of duplicate job titles, but there's also a big fat 30
the no
in
value.
the no value.
So agreed. The something I always do with this, and again, I think this is why eventually this is going to be some agent or something that has like a 90% prompt structure, and then you add in that last 10% of what you're trying to accomplish, because I always include some level of like, give me the knownness of a property value. Like, because if most of them are just null values, then it's not even a strong indicator of anything. So having some kind of agent or something where you're indicating, okay, this is what I'm trying to do. This is what you're trying to get the output of. Pay attention to, are they known? Are they not known? What are the similarities? What are their exact matches? What are the similarities? What are the fuzzy matches? All that. And then telling it like, I'm going to be doing lead scoring here, because a lot of it can create these bands, which is really interesting, of like, okay, if it's in this band, then allocate XYZ. If it's in a lower band, then, go from there.
Yeah. And this is where you can get yourself into trouble when you rely too much on the CRM super users as well. Or just the people that like are diehard, like this is the right strategy that we should be doing. They're the ones entering the data that might always say CEO, right? And then like the 30 unknowns are where you uncover the other job titles and then be like, oh, so simply the decision to do this, right, is what will start to get you down the path of clean data.
Yeah. And I think another important thing is Chris, you kind of bring it up, of understanding kind of at each property level, what are the possible things updating it? Like, is this property 100% exclusively updated by CRM UI? Or does sometimes it get imported by an integration? Sometimes it get imported by an import. Like, understanding the like source of the property level, adding a big factor on like, how much weight should I put into this? Because if it gets something that is touched by some integration that changes every 2 weeks because some news source is connected and sent an API call, then like that's a little bit more scary to put a significant weight behind.
Yeah. So fit, although is like, I think easy conceptually, and mostly because this is what people have been scoring on for a really long time. The old scoring model was mostly a fit model. However, what we're all saying is like, it's easy, but there's a ton of bias in probably what you're scoring on, but even potentially bias in your data. So, it's easy enough to say you want all CEOs, and it might even, to Chris's point, your data might even say you have your entire database is CEOs. That's amazing. But being aware of like the context there and how reliable your data is going to be really important. The next signal is engagement signals, and I think we can talk about this and progression signals kind of together because I think they're related. When we talk about traditionally, when we've been talking about engagement signals, we've been talking about what are they doing, and we've spent a couple weeks talking about what they're doing at each of our value path stages. So how do we know if they're a researcher versus a hand raiser? And I'm going to start with that one because it's kind of the easiest, because hand raising is a type of engagement. It means that they raised their hand and said, hello, I would like to talk to sales. They filled out your pricing form, your demo form. Maybe they even messaged someone on your team directly and said, yes, I would like to schedule a meeting with you. Other types of engagement might be things like visiting your website, interacting with your social media profile, things of that nature. And so downloading pieces of content, things like that. But the reason I'm framing this with the progression signals is, and this is truly the challenge, is like, which of those, where do those signals lie? And that's where like context is going to be really important. Who they are is really important. Chris, you're staging something up, I think. Are you ready for me to show your screen, or?
Yep.
Am I moving too quickly? I don't know.
I'm always ready. Almost. Yeah. So this is where, like, as I'm thinking through what we're showing as examples, like the part that we need to overcome versus the way that things have always been done is that we've been limited to measure engagement based on the tech stack and the platforms that we use, right? So as an example, content downloads, super easy to measure. Social discovery, right, has not been easy to measure. But now HubSpot's giving us things like social tools inside of scoring to be able to track this. And I just want to note, like, there was a Reddit thread in the HubSpot Reddit yesterday that was about, I can't believe that we can't track gated content. And I was just like, what is happening here? This doesn't make any sense. And what they explained is that, how do I know that they're reading the PDF that they downloaded? Right. And that's where, if you use like, the documents tool in HubSpot, or instead of downloading the PDF, they're going to a landing page, like that's how you're tracking stuff. And thankfully somebody chimed in, like, if they're able to track me once it's in my local computer, like that's called malware, right? Like, so generally frowned upon. But yeah, like, these are examples of engagement. And we talked about, or we should talk about, like, it's less about don't do it the old way, only do it the new way, right? I'm working with a client now that they have emails going out to club members, right? People paying for a club membership to get something in return. and people aren't getting these emails, or they're not opening them, or something's happening, right? That email engagement related to that, opening, clicking, some confirmation that they have received this more transactional email, like deserves a score, right? If it's a part of your overall like relationship plan with that human, right? Like depth of if we go to like the signal strength, right? The difference between like when somebody introduces the other stakeholders on their team, that's the difference between an open, a click on one of the links, and a reply that says, "Hey, great to be involved in this thing. Like, great to meet you, man." Right? Those are three different like signal strengths inside of the same channel, right? So if you're not like, the only way you can dig into this nuance is to dig into it, right? And that's to have conversations with the team, and also ask, like, don't be afraid to ask the humans on the other side, like, "Oh, did you see that email? Like, I saw you clicked on it, or what caused you to reply? Like, what are you excited about?" Like, taking engagement as soon as it arrives in front of you, like, how are we leveraging it as a team? How can we turn it into further engagement? Or are we making sure that we know that they're that engaged, which is often a miss too, right?
Yeah. I don't know if this, I mean, I think this can get us off on a tangent, but I'll do it anyway.
That's what we do here. All good.
I think the signal miss is like, I think that's the most complicated part of this, in my opinion, because it is hard to tell, and everyone, truly, everyone at the organization is motivated to say someone is closer to being ready to buy than they really are. And everyone's motivated by that because everyone wants them to. Everyone, if you at that organization, wants them to buy. And I think it's hard not to let your biases get in. So a real story that between the three of us last week was I had a intro call with an organization looking for help with lead scoring, and there were like 5 people on the call, I think, and I went into our shared CRM and updated all of them to hand raisers because they all attended that sales call. And then I got later that afternoon, got on the phone with Chris and Riley, and I was like, but are they all hand raisers? Because only one of them actually scheduled the call. He just invited everyone. And Chris and Riley both were like, no, what are you like? What are you, insane?
It's not insane. It's just it's one of those remnants of the ways of old. Of like, if someone shows up at this further developed thing, then we consider everyone equally developed. And to me, like, them showing up there, if it's 5 people show up and only one other person speaks, like, you have one potential hand raiser, and then 4 people who are like the definition of audience. They were just in the audience of your conversation. And then the more engagement that you can kind of glean from them on that call or after that call moves them kind of forward. But as soon as you said it, I'm like, if I'm moving quickly, I would have probably fallen in the same trap of like, yeah, okay, they all showed up. Like, we're all moving them all to here. This is where, like, if you kind of have to pause and reframe a lot when trying to use this framework, because it's just not the way that our brains were like entrained for all of this stuff.
Right.
But it's the way our brains, we intuitively know it. So like we know that it's like the right thing, and it's just this thin layer of like CRM-ness that we've been built, like trained on, that we're like, no, we have to get rid of that.
Yeah. And what we're actually getting rid of is like the way that we dehumanize the process to make the 5 hand raiser labels work.
Yeah.
It's like the only reason we would do that. And I was guilty of this as before we all had the conversation about this. It's like, okay, I got to make this work so that all 5 can be at the same like label. And then as soon as I get other people in the room, it's like, oh, that's dead on arrival. It doesn't make any sense. Like, why would I be doing this? It's like, oh, because I'm looking at a contact record and I need to see all these people associated. And of course they're all going to have the same. It's like, no, of course they're not all going to have the same label. Right. It's a hard trap to break free from, for sure. But the reason, and I love any of Joshua Oakes's demonstrations about deal tags and like who's associated and when, like that's why tracking of this information is so powerful and so nuanced, because the difference between, oh, we got the IT evaluator involved after the quote this time, and every time that happens we lose, versus when we get them involved before we get into quote, right, we win because now they're involved in the conversation, right? Those are the kinds of insights that you can get when you're aligning, like that person is going to show up to that meeting about the quote in a dramatically different way if they were involved earlier in the process versus they're hearing it for the first time and they don't agree with like what's happening, right? So that's the combination of like engagement and progression. Like, where are they in this journey? Because if you know ahead of time they're showing up to the meeting as audience, you do work with either your champion, or if the champion wants you to do it, like, hey man, here's bringing you up to speed ahead of this meeting. Like, every time you've heard about, like, send the executives a brief like 2 days before so they can review. And when you don't do that and they're seeing it for the first time, like, they're showing up as audience instead of showing up as like a more educated, attendee of the meeting, and that dramatically changes what happens inside of the meeting.
Yeah. So Chris, what you have up on the screen, kind of, you have some use cases there. And you had one just for like my exact use case where there were a couple people that joined. What do we do? Like, how do we know where people really are? Because I want this organization to buy lead scoring from us. So to me, it's very hard to look at anyone as an audience specifically. Like, at least, like, okay, you're right. Maybe they didn't all raise their hand, but they all showed up to this call, so they're all researchers. What can I do? What should I do?
You should ask AI for help. Like, and that's the crux of all this. Like, no, humans aren't designed to keep track of 5 different people at 5 different stages of their journeys, both inside the buying process and like what's happening in their life. Like, what did they mention on the call that says they're checked in or checked out, or they're busy, or like, I think I've seen so many people give up on a deal after there's been trust built and like they've said they said they want to move forward, and they just went away for a week. They just had a vacation. Just something was busy. They didn't get back to you right away. It doesn't mean you lost. It just means the human on the other side got busy. And there's a good chance that they mentioned that thing was upcoming and we weren't paying attention to it. Right. So I think using AI to evaluate engagement when it happens, where it happens, is probably our only hope if we want to do this like on a consistent basis, with quality. Yeah.
So I need to send my transcript to AI. First I need to send AI some sort of like context on what each value path is.
Right. And we need this is where if we should know that in this case, in order to have success with this relationship and what we want them to be buying from us to solve this problem of scoring, we should know which roles in the organization usually need to be involved, right? And in this case, for a complex B2B sale, we know the CEO needs to be needs to understand or needs to be involved in the process. Regional operations manager, director of IT, chief financial officer, and director of operations, right? If we have to label them ahead of time and say, hey, AI, these are the user stories for these people that usually have to be involved.
Mm-hmm.
If we usually have data that says, okay, the CFO will say things like this if they're still in audience stage, like this if they're still in research, like this if they're in buying mode, right? And start to create that matrix of understanding, those guardrails for AI to be able to say, oh, this person who is the CFO said this thing, and I know that this makes them a researcher, right? They're not.
Mm-hmm.
They're not. They understand the context of the conversation, right? Something like that is very challenging for humans to make that call in an unbiased way. Like, oh
Mm-hmm.
yeah, they're bought in. They were smiling, the whole time, but they never said any words that meant anything, right? So they give you a good feeling, but then you come back and whenever you bet on the other side of that, and you're the champion, and you think the same thing, and then you talk to the CFO behind the scenes, and they're like, "Yeah, I don't know, what? That's what was said? That's not what I heard." Or yeah, I wasn't paying attention. I was just there. I had some other stuff going on, 10 screens up, right? You can tell, and this is where the new Gemini model can watch videos on YouTube right now, but eventually probably any kind of video,
Mm-hmm.
and start to understand the visual language that is really at the heart of so much human communication. Because we're probably not at the level of what we need to be in terms of tonality and can you just read text on a page and understand sarcasm, right? Probably
Mm-hmm.
not. But once we decide to take this structure, it enables us to start learning and start going in the right direction.
And I mean, maybe I don't know if I want to say these words. That's why I'm struggling. This doesn't feel like lead scoring to me, or scoring, value first scoring. This is different. This is categorizing, right?
What do you mean?
There's not a score. Traditionally, we would be saying once they reach a score of 100, then they will be in our research. But we're not saying that. We're saying we need to send the transcript to AI, and we need AI to tell us whether they're a researcher based on the things that they said. There's no way to build a score based on that.
I think we're asking AI for help to understand signal strength and relevancy, like what Riley was mentioning.
Mm-hmm.
In that it is, I do like the concept of each one of these has a 0 to 100,
Mm-hmm.
and you're saying okay, based on these things, like we start to transition to the next phase. But I do think we're asking AI for help. It's like basically scoring the trust and value of the relationship at each stage in the journey. And we need to give AI the guardrails for that.
Yeah, I think you define the process and you define the terms and define the framework, and then AI is attributing its like confidence score where anyone is in all of these.
Yeah.
Where it would be like, all right, I'm 80% confident this person is in researcher. That's equivalent to like an 80 out of 100 researcher score. But it's like the old way of doing it, where each contact record has this section called score that has a numerical representation of it, is like not a part of this. It's basically you're measuring all of the information about this person. You're taking everything about them and ingesting it into AI, and then trying to have it match what it thinks the scores are.
Yeah.
In that way.
So does this replace scoring?
Yeah, so I struggle to see where we would ever actually, other than, so to me, the why of scoring is resource deployment, resource allocation. Of like, why are we scoring an individual is for resource allocation when you're looking at each individual record. But then I don't think we will need the lead scoring section in HubSpot for that anymore. I think what you will need it for, the other why, is like just CRM segmentation. Like to just be able to look at 1,000 contacts and have them measured on some hierarchy of scores. And so you can kind of segment and prioritize and kind of see where things are for that reason. So I think you could still use lead scoring for that in terms of how it's currently built and what it actually is. But as far as how it's managed for each individual record, I think AI will just become better than whatever you could build. Because whatever you're building inside of the lead scoring portal is just a dumbed down version of what AI is going to be doing when it's assessing a record. As long as you've defined the goal criteria for each of all of this information, then it will do it better, and on a score of like 0 to 1,000,000, like more than you could ever actually have granularity.
So when we say, what are we scoring, in the not so distant future, the answer is whatever the hell AI says.
The question is, what is AI score?
What is AI? None of my business.
It's very much your business.
No.
Yeah.
And it is like humans collaborating with AI to create the context structure needed to come up with those like the confidence scores, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's where the difference between these activities across businesses are huge, right? Like one business cares about a lot, another business won't care about at all.
Mm-hmm.
And AI will help you confirm or deny that. And like, especially along the journey, like in technical spaces, like depending on what they downloaded and when can mean everything, right? Like whether it's just a one-pager tech specs, right? Which actually seems like not that much, but when the right person is downloading it, wherever they are in the journey, that means they're ready to go, right? There's the only reason they would be downloading that thing is because they're in buy mode. And then the next step for them is like a long, like technical manual about how it works, like for them, right? And you can flip those around so that the long ebook, for lack of a better example, gets downloaded up front in SaaS, let's say, because we need to understand the concept behind the problem that we have. And then later on, we need that one pager so that we can give it to, the decision maker, and like with videos or whatever, right?
Mhm.
So it's if you don't give AI that context, it will view those activities as the same,
Mhm.
right? Well, this is a one pager, and usually it means this, and this is 50, 50 pages long, and if they consume that, then it means they're obviously bought in. It's like, well, it depends on when they're doing it and which industry they're in.
And who they are, and
Yeah,
what
all
they've
the
done
things that we're
before this,
talking
and
about.
what we want them to do after this. And
Right. Yep. So, and then again, like with this structure, either we're asking questions or AI is asking questions of, like in the situation you're describing, Casey. If you don't feel like you have enough information to understand where the extra stakeholders are in the journey, they stay at audience until something happens that likely you trigger by asking the champion or asking that stakeholder directly. Like, hey, you came into the call, you didn't say a whole lot. Just wondering, like, what your thoughts are. However, that conversation can be had through the champion, or like if you ask the champion, like, hey, can you set something up? I think we need to do more work with this specific stakeholder, right?
Mhm.
Like, starting with the decision to do the structure says, okay, we haven't heard from this person. I need to take action because we don't have the signals that we need
Mhm.
to move forward. Whether they are bought in or not, we don't have them in our system, right?
Mhm. All right. So that's time. Obviously, we could keep talking. Obviously, we're all still learning.
Mhm.
But today we organized what actually deserves scoring into 3 categories: your fit signals, the unchangeable stuff, company attributes, industry size, foundation that tells you if there's even a potential fit, the engagement signals, which are not necessarily volume but depth, the content consumption patterns, the frequency, consistency of visits that reveals genuine research versus casual browsing, and then progression signals. This is the big one, and we are questioning how sophistication changes, how do stakeholder involvement emerges, and how content consumption shifts from what is this to how does it work for us to help me build this. And that is blah blah blah. Um, all because we can track activity all day long. HubSpot makes that part easy, but recognizing the signal progression, that's where it gets hard, and that's the part that we're going to need some help with, because our internal motivations are going to encourage us to show more progression. And progression is more than did what they did. It's, what's changing. And honestly, humans aren't great with spotting this. So here's your homework. Look at your current scoring model. Ask yourself, am I scoring activity or am I scoring progression? Because if it's just activity, you're probably creating as much noise as signal. And that's it for today. Thanks for spending your Monday morning with us. I hope if you're in the US, you have a great Thanksgiving, and we will see you next Monday.
Bye, all. Happy Thanksgiving.